Question. If you could read minds, would it be a good thing or a bad thing? If you could know what everybody was thinking, would humanity fill you with hope or despair? And what about your relationships? I mean, if you knew exactly what your partner was thinking, would it take your relationship to new heights of intimacy or completely kill it? Daisy was less than 24 hours into her new life of adulthood when she was unwittingly given the ability to read minds. It was an 18th birthday gift she hadn't asked for, did not understand, and would quickly regret. So far, her birthday had been explosively fun, but safely predictable. That was until around 8:15 p.m. in the bustling terminal of Waterloo train station, London. She'd bundled onto the train near her home in Oxshott, Surrey, with a crowd of her giggling and squealing friends to head into London's West End to celebrate her birthday. And she didn't think anything was out of the ordinary when an elderly, homeless-looking man approached her at Waterloo Station. She was used to this. It happened all the time. So often, in fact, that she carried a special coin holder with £1 coins just to give to homeless people asking for money in London. Her friends teased her endlessly about it, but it was no use. That was Daisy, and everybody knew it. It went with the territory. It was just who she was. She was everybody's best friend, the girlfriend that every girl wishes she had. Caring, fun-loving, kind-hearted with everybody, and absolutely genuine. She was the real deal. A help the world, everybody's bestie, happy hippie chick, Californian beach babe with flowers in her hair. She was the perfectly packaged, save the planet, glass half full Barbie who always knew what to say to make you feel better even on the toughest days. Her childhood and early years were definitely happy ones, and she already had a really happy life in the US. But then the needle on the amazing life-ometer went completely off the scale when she moved with her parents all the way from California to London when her dad landed a high-powered job during her mid-teens, and she was loving life. Daisy had a great relationship with her parents, which was a really good thing because they spent so many of their weekends together touring European cities. Honestly, it was the lifestyle that dreams are made of for an American teenager. Paris, Rome, Amsterdam, Prague, Vienna, Berlin, Milan, and a dozen other European cities had become her weekend stomping grounds with her parents. But when all was said and done, she always thought of London as her European home from home, and she loved to spend time with her friends smack bang in the middle of the action, right in the heart of the city's famed West End. So on the night of her 18th birthday, walking with her friends through Waterloo train station on a busy Saturday evening, it was just another homeless guy and another trip through London for Daisy as she slipped into her well-rehearsed routine to flick open her coin holder, pass the guy some money and wish him a great day. Until he refused. Refused? That's right, refused. He politely but decisively refused. And that's what got Daisy's attention. It's really kind of you, miss, but since it's your 18th birthday, I've got a gift for you. Now it was getting creepy. It wasn't the first time she'd had that kind of a pickup line from a drunk guy, and besides, how did he know it was her birthday? Her friends, they were squirming already, and Daisy was trying to hide the awkwardness from her face as she politely tried to sidestep him. That's really kind, she said, but I've had plenty of gifts already today. Oh no, miss, it's not like that. I'm not that kind of gentleman, he replied. He sounded like Hagrid from Harry Potter, a lot like a friendly-sounding pirate at a children's party. Not too threatening, but hard to take seriously. She fully intended to just keep on walking, but then he held out an antique-looking walking stick with a handful of coloured gemstones embedded into the surprisingly polished base, and something caught her attention about the pink gemstone. When she glanced at it, it was like a movie scene where the whole world goes into slow motion and everything just goes quiet. Really quiet. Her friends kept walking, but Daisy just stood there, captivated. It felt like it was just the two of them in a soundproof glass room right there in the middle of Waterloo train station. The man carefully plucked out the pink stone from his walking stick, placed it inside an intricately delicate little cage on a gold necklace and held it out to her. "This is especially for you, my dear. You've been helping lots of people, and this'll let you help even more," he said. Completely mesmerized, she reached out and took the necklace. The moment she held the gemstone in her hand, her eyes widened as it began to gently glow. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It is," he replied. "It's a beautiful gift for a beautiful girl with a beautiful heart." Now, it wasn't just a gentle glow that captivated her, but the feeling. It was like she'd just been reunited with a long-lost soulmate. "With this gift," he said gently, "you can know what folks are really thinking. Use it wisely, and it'll always be your friend." She didn't notice him leave or see where he went. She was too wrapped up with the gemstone. But as the noise and bustle returned, she could feel tears streaming down her cheeks. It felt as though she'd just been through some kind of super therapy session at some kind of mountain retreat in Tibet. But as she realised she was still very much in central London on her 18th birthday night out, she kind of pulled herself together, snapped out of it, put on the necklace and ran to catch up with her friends. London's West End on a summertime Saturday night is a noisy, bustling and busy place at the best of times. That's probably why Daisy didn't really notice at first. She was so busy chattering with one of her friends that she didn't pay much attention to the way that the conversation around her, it was a lot more random, unrelated and chaotic than usual. It was like people were talking to themselves and not really listening to each other. In fact, it wasn't until she heard her friend Amy completely losing it with her boyfriend Miles that the penny finally started to drop. She turned towards them, fully expecting to see a row emerging, but instead, Miles was bumbling along, totally oblivious to Amy's yelling. And instead of a face full of screaming rage, Amy was just glaring at the pavement whilst they walked. What? I mean, her lips weren't even moving, but she could hear it clear as day. And she knew for a fact that it was Amy because it was definitely not the first time she had heard her arguing with Miles. "What?" snapped Amy, glaring at Daisy. That was the moment Daisy realised she'd been staring at Amy's mouth a little too closely for a little too long. Awkward. Daisy shook herself back into the real world with a startled jolt, but she couldn't stop staring at Amy's mouth. "I swear, Daisy, if it's the lipstick, it's your fault for telling me it looked great," she heard Amy snap. Daisy heard the words, but Amy's mouth didn't even flinch. I mean, her mind was racing as her friends had all stopped to see what was going on. But whilst she could hear their befuddled, rambling, chattering words, it was like being in the middle of a convention of ventriloquists. Nobody's lips were moving. One by one, she stared in bewilderment at each of her friends until finally Miles' lips moved and actually matched his words. "Daisy, are you okay?" he said. Your lips, they're moving," she muttered. There was a quiet pause whilst Miles struggled to muster a polite response. But it didn't really matter because Daisy could hear every one of his unfiltered thoughts. "She's lost it. Did she take something on the train? I didn't see her take anything, but you never know. Maybe it's hidden in her lip gloss." Daisy could hear the words, but couldn't take her eyes off his lips. They didn't move a muscle. It was somewhere round about this awkward moment that Daisy remembered the words of the old homeless guy. "With this gift, my dear, you can know what folks are really thinking." Is that supposed to glow like that, or is it about to explode?" asked Miles slowly, staring at Daisy's necklace with a decidedly worried look on his face. Daisy looked down at her necklace, and sure enough, it was glowing like some kind of irradiated pink kryptonite. She couldn't believe it. Was this really happening? I mean, was this actually, genuinely, really happening? The realization hit her like that moment on a roller coaster when you finally tip over the edge after the long, slow climb to the top of the first peak. I can hear all your thoughts, she blurted out excitedly. And that was it. Just like the thrill-riding roller coaster, she was off. Thoughts racing, mouth chattering, words tumbling, hands waving, and all mixed together with fast-flowing squeals of delight and screams of excitement. And that's how it went, all the way to the West End Club where they had reserved a party table for her big birthday night. Daisy and her friends had all met at the International Community School in Cobham, Surrey. It was a private, fee-paying school for the children of wealthy expats from all over the world who worked in London, and because the largest group of students were American, the school followed the same US education curriculum. This meant compulsory education until age 18. So for Daisy and her friends, 18 didn't just represent legal adulthood, but more or less the end of high school too. And another bonus for American teenagers living in the UK was that the legal age for drinking alcohol is 18 rather than 21 like the US. Now these things, coupled with the fact that Daisy was the youngest of her group of friends and the last to finally turn 18, it all meant that they had all agreed that tonight deserved to be a big glitzy night out. So with all these factors mixed with Daisy's magical new mind-reading powers, it was no wonder that by the time she bounced through the door of the club, arm in arm with a couple of her girlfriends, Daisy was about as excited as she had been at all her other 17 birthday parties combined. But then there was Jake. Handsome, hunky, steady boyfriend Jake. There wasn't a birthday party scenario in the whole world that would be complete without Jake. And there he was, ready, waiting, charming, grinning, and gorgeous. Flowers in hand, wearing his James Bond-esque tuxedo. I mean, he was the image of perfection. 6 months they'd been together now, 6 months. For Daisy, this was the real deal, at least about as real as any teenage school crush turned boyfriend relationship could be. And to top it all off, he wasn't just tall, dark and handsome. He was a social giver instead of what Daisy called a social taker. Basically, he was her kind of guy. The kind of guy who gives more to society than takes from it. He was a real deal hero type of guy. At least that's what Daisy had convinced herself. You see, when they first met, he'd managed to help catch her attention by helping her to organise a school charity fundraiser. He'd kind of heard that she was into that stuff. And because he'd helped her with all her other help the world charitable endeavours, Daisy had convinced herself that he was a real deal social giver too. Her friends, they weren't entirely sure about that part, but he was definitely the most popular boy in school, so as far as they were concerned, Daisy had already struck boyfriend gold. And so his charms had been welcomed and embraced into the group by all the girls. But for Daisy, he really did seem to be the whole package deal, but with one critical element that all the other boys were missing: loyalty. Daisy could overlook all kinds of personality disasters, but if she was going to throw her heart and soul into a relationship, the one thing that was absolutely non-negotiable was loyalty. If she was going to give her all to a guy, she absolutely could not settle for anything less than exactly the same in return. She didn't mind that she wasn't a royal princess as long as she was his royal princess. She didn't mind not being the perfect girl, just as long as she was his perfect girl. For her, above all else, that's what made Jake perfect. He never had eyes for anybody but her. She was his star prize, and she knew it. As they settled into their table through the noise and bustle of the club, she scanned around the room, testing the limits of her new gift. For the most part, it was really intriguing, though she started to realise things got awkwardly personal very quickly. But for somebody who could only see glasses that were half full and clouds that were silver-lined, the anticipation of the possibilities of this new gift was thrilling, to say the least. She was already having the time of her life playing with her new birthday gift when one of her friends inadvertently took things to a whole new level. Freya was the charity case of the group. She was cute as a button and sweet as honey, but she was a train wreck when it came to picking her boys. So when she was scanning the room and started to gush about the cute guy in the red shirt standing at the bar, the girls knew that meant she was already charging into trouble again. "But he looks like a genuine nice guy," she protested as her friends rolled their eyes, groaned and buried their faces in their hands. But not Daisy. She was carefully watching the red shirt guy and concentrating really hard as her gemstone necklace gently glowed. At the start of the evening, people's thoughts, they were like chaotic noise to her. But she discovered that if she focused on just one person and tried to imagine it was just the two of them alone in a room together, those thoughts became louder and clearer. And the clearer one person's thoughts became, other people's thoughts just faded away. This was way better than normal hearing, where you can't control the volume around you. This was quickly turning out to be far more precise, as long as she focused. And when she wanted to, focusing was something she was surprisingly good at. The guy in the red shirt was starting to become a real person now. The first thoughts she encountered were the ones that were kind of on the tip of his tongue, the things that he'd share gladly with anybody that would listen. But the really juicy stuff, that was hidden away, required a little more digging. She found telepathy was like stepping into a person's home. The first things she came across were the things a person would be happy to share with anybody, but not the private stuff. The really interesting stuff was hidden in the small corner closets and locked boxes in a person's brain. For Daisy, rooting around in a person's head, it was like wandering freely around somebody's home without them knowing and having all the keys to all the locked closets and all the secret cupboards. At first, she felt awkward and kind of guilty about prying so deeply into a person's deepest private thoughts, but she and her friends knew several painfully predictable things about their dear, lovely, sweet, disaster-prone friend Freya. First, when she decided she liked the look of a boy, that was it. She was all in until the inevitable painful end. Feet first, full on, caution is for losers. By the time Freya had mentioned a boy out loud, her friends knew it was too late. She'd already made her decision and she was planning the wedding. The second thing they knew about Freya is that she always picked disastrous boys. And when the inevitable end came, she'd share her heartache with everybody, along with all the dark, dirty secrets that she knew about him. And she always seemed to find the dirt. So Daisy decided that since she was bound to find out about Red Shirt's embarrassing secrets anyway, she'd just do Freya a favour and cut out all the usual painful bits. After a few ugly minutes, she had discovered enough. She rattled off a text message and sent it off to Freya. The girls had been so busy discussing what potential disasters lay in store for Freya with this guy that they entirely forgot about the new mind-reading, secrets-discovering powers of the birthday girl herself. And when they all realised that Daisy had just been scanning Red Shirt's brain, they scurried to crowd around Freya to read the text on her phone. One by one, their hands flew up to their mouths in shock as they read Daisy's brutal assessment. It was not pretty, but in fairness, it was entirely consistent with Freya's usual choice of guys. "Okay, smarty pants," said Freya as she grumpily crossed her arms and slid back into her seat. "Who would you choose for me?" And that was it. Game on. All eyes turned to Daisy as a cheeky grin crept across her face and she began to scan the room with her gemstone gently glowing into life. First guy? No. Second guy? Ew. Third guy? Yikes. Fourth guy? What? Daisy was checking out all the hottest guys in the club and starting to wonder how anybody found love if these were the options. Even Little Miss Sunshine Daisy was on the verge of getting discouraged until she decided to switch tactics and close her eyes. This time it was different. This time she stopped checking out the guys first and started to feel her way around the room. This time she struck lucky. She opened her eyes to check out her prize. Not the hottest guy in the room, a work in progress you might say, but definitely the right kind of guy where it mattered most. So she rattled off another text message to Freya, waited for her and the rest of the girls to read it, and then pointed to an awkward-looking guy in a blue shirt. "Him?" blurted Freya in disbelief. "Him," replied Daisy confidently. The text message read, "Heart of Gold, trainee air ambulance pilot." Freya thought for a moment, looked at the text message, looked at the guy, looked at her friends with their faces brimming with anxious encouragement, and she started to grin. 2 minutes later, Freya was smiling away and twirling her hair, chatting to the shy and awkward-looking blue shirt guy. Success, thought Daisy to herself as she settled back into her seat and snuggled up to Jake. By 10 p.m, she'd got her save the world life with all of her new telepathic gift all worked out. First, she was going to help her girlfriends find guys who weren't total freaks, and once she'd found boyfriends for all of them, she'd help people fix their relationship problems. She figured if she could get inside couples' heads, she could help them really understand each other better so they could quit fighting. And finally, she'd become an international diplomat and help to negotiate peace treaties between warring nations. Yep, she was going to help save the world. But none of that ever really got started because this was the night that Daisy began to discover the bitter, relationship-killing truth. Telepathy sucks. That was the night that Daisy started to wonder if her telepathic gift was really a curse. She was still grinning at the thought of bringing about world peace when Daisy looked up at Jake and snuggled into him just a little bit tighter. This was the best birthday ever, she thought, as she gazed up at him, bouncing his head to the music and looking around the club. If she had just left it there, the evening could possibly, maybe, perhaps still have ended happily. But once the thought popped into her head, it was never going to go away. I mean, it was an innocent enough question, the kind of question that millions of normal women ask their men all the time. What was he thinking about? Her gemstone necklace slowly began to glow as she looked at Jake more intensely. She was grinning a delightful, cheeky little grin at first. But as her gemstone glowed brighter, her grin faded and tears quickly filled her eyes.